Good evening and welcome to our COVID-19 update. I am Ladi Akiridulwale. Here are the highlights at this hour. Benue State prepares for local government elections tomorrow, a first since the COVID-19 pandemic started in Nigeria. Federal government bans sale and use of rapid test kits in the country, says they are defective. And schools in South Korea shut down days after reopening in the wake of a cluster of COVID-19 infections. We begin tonight from the United States, where President Donald Trump has just announced that the United States is terminating its relationship with the World Health Organization, the WHO, and will be directing its funds to other global public health charities. The president made the announcement this evening at the White House. He blames China for misleading the world body about the coronavirus and for the loss of lives and profound economic hardship faced by the world today. Mr. Trump's criticism of the WHO started last month when he threatened to permanently withdraw U.S. funding if the body did not, quote, commit to major substantive improvements within the next 30 days. Back here at home, the Benue State government says it will go ahead with the local government elections in spite of the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases across the country. According to the latest data from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Benue has recorded 7 cases with only 1 person discharged. The election was initially billed for November of 2019, but was shifted then due to logistics. The State Independent Electoral Commission says it has put measures in place to curb the spread of the virus during the exercise. Our correspondent, Pius Angbo, now gives a situation report from Makurdi.
The Benue State Independent Electoral Commission insists that it will conduct elections into chairmanship and councillorship in the 23 local governments across Benue State tomorrow. And this, it says, is because plans for the conduct of election has been in the works since 2019. It was only postponed in January to accommodate the realities of the coronavirus pandemic. And it says that because the disease has come to stay, institutions must begin to work in alignment with the realities of our times. As such, there are certain conditions and parameters for the conduct.
I want to state categorically that already our plans are in very top gear. What we are doing now basically is the recontinuation from where we stopped. So before the advent of this natural disaster. And I want to assure the Benue populace that precautionary measures are well placed, are in order, in the usage of masks as evident on my face now, and then hand sanitizers among others. And we are going to, we are going to maintain social distances and all that. So I want to assure the Benue people that elections are going to be free, fair, and credible.
If these steps are kept and voters play their part, elections can go on smoothly from Benue. Pius Angbo for Channels Television.
The Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria says samples of all 4 rapid diagnostic test kits for COVID-19 submitted to the council for validation fall below the acceptable standards for testing the virus. Speaking at a news conference in Abuja, the registrar of the council, Mr. Tosa Arabo, insists that there is currently no single rapid test kit for COVID-19 that has passed the validation test in Nigeria. The regulatory body warns against the use of such diagnostic tests by medical labs, hospitals, and individuals, while promising to go after vendors of such test kits for COVID-19.
It's to be considered reliable for laboratory diagnosis and disease surveillance. The kit should have high sensitivity and specificity. A kit performing very well in one of these characteristics without the other renders it unsuitable for diagnostic testing. It is also unsuitable if both characteristics are low. As of today, 29th May 2020, there is no rapid test kit that has passed validation in Nigeria. And no one should use any of these test kits in this country for now. From this moment, the management of Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria will be liaising with the law enforcement agency to fish out those people, unscrupulous people that brought these kits illegally into our dear country, Nigeria.
Registrar of Council there, Mr. Tosa Erabo. The 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew imposed by the federal government almost 4 weeks ago may be entering its last lap this weekend. But while that has lasted, most motorists and heavy-duty trucks have consistently been caught up in curfew time. The consequence can be seen in, amongst others, a long queue of vehicles, especially on the Kara Bridge on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, with some dire implications. Our next report examines the situation as it prevails.
Quintessential Lagos. Depending on what time of the day it is, you will find vehicular traffic on a particular side of the road, indicative of morning or evening rush hour. Nothing is different on this occasion from this evening's rush hour, save for a curfew which many are struggling to beat. The novel coronavirus has left many upsets, including restrictions of movement either by a sit-down and home order or the curfew order issued by President Buhari a fortnight ago. The effect has now been seen with several vehicles caught up in the web when it sets in at 8 p.m. The long queue, especially of articulated trucks, have become a dead weight on the Kara Bridge along Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Are there dangers in this new normal for trucks who waited out on this bridge for about 10 hours in the last 2 weeks?
Are they damaging the infrastructure? You bet they are. You bet they are. Not only the bridges, even the roads, the carriageway that are not bridges, have carrying capacity, have weight capacity. And therefore, yes, by the time you are turning carriageway into parking lots, you're doing damage.
And here's what the federal government thinks and might be doing to curtail them.
Once you don't use some of this infrastructure the way they are supposed to use, government spend more money. So money that ordinarily should be going somewhere else, you keep spending to be fixing.
When we are coming, there is a many hold up on the road, and we can't park where we are. Last month we come and tow our truck. So that is why we can't wait in Lagos.
While the blame game goes on, there should have been a more proactive position, experts say.
If you're going to put this law, people are going to get to this border at 8 o'clock. We're expecting 500 vehicles to get to this border at 8 o'clock. Let's prepare for them.
The curfew order will see out its term this weekend. Fingers are crossed on what would be government's next action. Hopefully, that will have an improved outline. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Well, Olu Phillips is right there on Kara Bridge at this point in time. Good evening, Olu. From the situation there, what is it at this point?
Ladi, good evening. It's a very chaotic evening this evening, so to speak. The bridge we're talking about is about 150 meters away from this place, and what we can see is people who have been caught up in the curfew. They are protesting, they want their way, they want to leave. We couldn't even move beyond this place to get to the bridge so that you can see the situation of the bridge. Since the lockdown started at 8 o'clock, we've tried to make our way to the bridge in the last 1 hour, and these guys won't let us drive through because they are protesting that the curfew should be lifted up or lifted so they can have their pass. And really, we can't get to the bridge, which is 150 meters behind me, which you may not be able to see because there's a sea of head here and cars, vehicles all packed left, right, center. All of this place is blocked from the Begas axis up to the border post, which is more than 600 meters, Ladi.
Well, Olu, I think it's safe to surmise then that the trucks, once again tonight, are on the bridge. The trucks, the trailers, the vehicles that were in your report earlier are still there even today.
Laddie, that is what it is. I mean, I grew up knowing curfew to be that which you hear as a signature tune or a follow-up to a coup d'etat. And when the military, for instance, tells you you don't move because there's a curfew, people don't move. But what we've seen is a situation where people want to keep driving until the last minute of 8 on the dot. And so if it takes them driving into the curfew time, driving and blocking other legitimate road users, you can imagine if there's emergencies at this point, nobody can cross because those who decided to park on the bridges have continuously and permanently made this place the carriageway, their parking lot, which is really, really very sad, Laddie. There isn't any form of control here as far as enforcement is concerned. And this is the concern we have raised over time in the last 6 weeks since the lockdown into the easing of lockdown and into the curfew, Laddie. This is a very sad and precarious situation where we can have law and order as far as obeying a simple presidential directive is concerned, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. People find it difficult to obey these directives and there are no enforcement. And I do know that actions should have consequences, but not in this case, Laddie.
All right, Olu, one can only say that please stay safe out there. We can see a couple of people behind you, not only not observing social distance, but also watching what you are saying. But thank you so much for your reporting, our correspondent Olu Phillips, near the Kara Bridge on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway at this point in time. The National Human Rights Commission has made a case for the Almajiri children in Nigeria. In an advisory issued by the Executive Secretary of the Commission, Mr. Tony Ojukwu, the NHRC says Almajiri children are exposed to increased vulnerabilities and risks, including death, trafficking, kidnapping, drug use and addiction, recruitment into terrorism, violent crimes, sexual and other forms of assault, as well as forced child marriages. Quoting the 1999 Constitution as it relates to child rights, the African Charter on Rights and the Welfare of Children, and other human rights instruments relating to the protection of the child, the Commission concludes that the northern governors must develop a multi-sectoral program of action to transfer, return, and rehabilitate Almajiri children. The Commission called for the development and implementation of a program of action by the northern state governments to permanently address the challenges posed by the Almajiri system to the children and the larger society. The global COVID-19 pandemic has put the Almajiri children in the spotlight as persons of interest as the nation battles to contain the spread of the virus. Repatriation of Almajiri to their states of origin is one of the measures taken by some state governors, particularly in northern Nigeria. Their repatriation serves two purposes: to protect them and indeed the general public, as the children could easily serve as couriers for the virus. The approach is different altogether in Borno State, which is one of the states where the children have continued to live their normal lives.
In Borno State, the government says it has big plans for children sent back home from other states. We are talking about pupils of Quranic schools who have been sent back in the phase of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the government has also said that it has no plans of repatriating children who have come to acquire such knowledge from other states. Now, the plan is to put these children in a setting where they can learn the Quran and still attend basic literacy classes. Now, this is going to be a Herculean task, saying that there are different categories of children on the streets of Maiduguri. Not all of them are actually students of Quranic schools. Not all of them are actually Almajiri. Some of them are unaccompanied children who are orphans of insurgency, and they have come from different parts of the state, and you find them in the streets.
We have collected those that they have sent to us. They are now being taken care of by the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, and afterwards they will be reintegrated back to the society. Those that we were able to trace their parents, we will unite them with their families. Those that could not identify their families, the government will now take care of them under a very well-articulated social welfare program.
Why do you need to bring children all the way from Sokoto, from Kazoria, from Gumel, from Kaduna, in search of what? Create nuisance. So it is high time. COVID-19 may be used as a pretext. The government's attempt to contain COVID-19 by confining the Almajiris or sending them to their places of origin may be better opportunity. But after the pandemic, what option do you have?
The conversation among scholars right now is if sending these children away from home in the first instance is actually a good idea. From Maiduguri, I am Blessing Tuno Aso for COVID-19 updates.
The COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions of movement has brought the age-long Almajiri system of education practiced in northern Nigeria into focus, leading to a recent decision by the northern governors to ban the practice. While many state governments are choosing to repatriate the pupils to their states of origin, some are exploring the option of integrating them into formal education.
Before now, the Almajiri system of education was an acceptable practice in northern Nigeria. Young boys would leave their parents in pursuit of Islamic knowledge to study under the tutelage of a malam. But with little or no provision for their upkeep, the benevolence of members of society was the only hope for their most basic need, food. With all the challenges and uncertainties brought by the spread of COVID-19 and restrictions on movement, the idea of having children roam the streets was unimaginable. The solution? An outright ban of the Almajiri system of education by the northern governors and the boys repatriated to the states of origin. The decision is accepted by the federal government.
We fully agree with the northern governors on the arrangement to take in and take back all Almajiris. Indeed, they are actually obeying the law because the UBEC Act of 2004 demands that there will be a local government enforcement body to make sure that all these children return back to schools.
The Yobe state government is building 7 model schools across the major cities where those who had been part of the Almajiri system in other states will join other pupils in acquiring both Quranic and formal basic education.
The issue of the doctrines of Islamic education, most of them are ignorant. You need to bring the parents, sit together with them. See, what you are doing, sending your son from Damaturu to Kano, it's un-Islamic at the age of 2, at the age of 3. Just trying to get yourself relief of what is primarily your responsibility. We have to educate them. And I want to believe that if they are well educated, they will keep their children to their chest. And they will not send them where they will be exposed to all sort of social mayhems, social vices that we are all now taking as an excuse to repatriate them.
The Kaduna State Governor is taking a firm stance, vowing to jail any parent or Islamic cleric who enrolls their children or wards into the Almajiri system for not less than 2 years. According to Governor Nasir El-Rufai, the ultimate goal is to transform the Almajiri peoples and give them hope by ensuring they acquire formal education.
We are going to monitor these children. We will track each and every one of them very, very closely to ensure that their parents don't let them go again. And any parent that does that would be prosecuted and could go to prison for as many as 2 years.
This new approach to addressing the Almajiri question might potentially solve the social and security challenges that have been associated with the Almajiri system over the years.
Coming up after the break, we'll take the very latest in the figures from the NCDC website on the statistics about Nigeria's COVID-19 pandemic. And then we'll talk to some of those who know a bit more about the Almajiri system of education in northern Nigeria. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Let's go to Abuja, to our Abuja studios to be specific, where our correspondent Kayla Megwa is standing by. Good evening, Kayla. As always, trust that you are keeping us safe. Today, it's the Almajiri children and what's going on with them, this whole issue. In your previous reporting, once or twice I remember having you talk about these children moving around in trucks, being hidden in trucks and moving from one place to another. Yet, officially, they're supposed to be moving to their states of origin.
It's a very worrisome situation, Laddie. Good evening. You know, and it's not one that we can make a blanket statement about, because there's a lot of narratives out there, and many of them may not necessarily be the truth. Is it possible that these kids have been moving around the country normally, you know, in the past, before COVID-19, and because now there's a lockdown, there's a curfew, we're able to now see the level of movement that has been going on? We have to understand that a lot of the people who live in northern Nigeria are migrants. So many of them were farmers, you know, and when there's drought or the farming season is not doing well, they go and they become shoe shiners. They go and they sell tea, they sell noodles and things like that in other parts of the country just so they can feed themselves. So this is something that has been going on for quite a while. There's a possibility that because there's a curfew, the spotlight has now been is now on them. You know, now we can see how much movement was going on. That's one possibility. There's also the theory, of course, that, you know, with COVID-19 and, you know, with the lockdowns and, you know, all of these things going on in the north, many people might want to migrate to other parts of the country where they can, you know, feed or make a living for themselves. These are all things that are going around. But the important thing, Laddie, is that this system of the Almajiri system started off as a good idea. The idea to instill that kind of knowledge in young children is a very good one, especially when it's a religious knowledge. However, we've seen it devolve, Laddie. It's become very terrible right now. Some people even turn it into a money-making venture. So it's a problem right now, and I think the northern governors are trying to do what they can to fix a problem that we don't know if they can fix right now, but we want to see what they will be doing to fix this problem. We'll be watching to see how it works out, Laddie.
The Minister of State Education did point out that what the northern governors are doing now is in fact the law, that they're just complying with the law now, which is that these children were supposed to have been formally integrated into the society in which they find themselves, and that those who can be traced back home should have gone back home and be integrated by their home governments. Now, from what you know, is that what we have seen happen? Because, as you said, there are different narratives out there.
So he is absolutely correct. The idea was, you know, the idea for the growth of a child, at least for the rules that we have on child growth and development, is that along with religious education, formal education is supposed to be going side by side. But what happened was we didn't see that happening anymore. What we even noticed, like one of the reports we saw earlier, many of the kids that you see on the street are not part of the Almajiri system. They're just people who have been displaced by Boko Haram, or people whose parents were unable to care for them and just throw them into the streets. Some of them have become people that, you know, kids that are making money for some unscrupulous elements. So it has gone very bad. And this was something that the northern governors were supposed to do a long time ago. They didn't. He says they're doing the right thing right now. We hope it's not too little too late.
Our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, thank you so much for your reporting and for your time. Do continue to stay safe out there. In 24 hours, 5 deaths were recorded as a result of COVID-19, bringing the total death toll from the virus to 259. That's for the last 24 hours. After the NCDC confirmed 182 cases of COVID-19, the total number of cases in the country now stands at 8,915, while 2,592 patients have recovered. According to the center, 35 states and the FCT have recorded confirmed cases of COVID-19, except Cross River. A look at the breakdown of the figures by region shows that Lagos in the southwest has 3,331 active cases and maintains the highest number of cases in all at 4,123, after recording 47 deaths and discharging 745 patients. Kano is the highest in the northwest with 939 cases and 139 recoveries, as well as 41 deaths. The FCT in the north central region maintains the third highest figure with 535 cases. Borno still leads in the northeast with 258, Edo in the south-south with 240, and Ebonyi in the southeast with 40 cases. Joining me in our studios now is Dr. Ola Brown, who is a medical doctor, a helicopter pilot, as well as a healthcare entrepreneur, founder of Flying Doctors Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Those figures I just reeled out are just over the last 24 hours, and then, of course, bringing us to the total. One thing that COVID-19 seems to have done is that it has exposed what is essentially a fragile situation with our healthcare delivery system.
Absolutely.
Which is what we now are faced with. COVID-19, we are told, isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what we can do is fix the healthcare system if it requires fixing. Do you think, what do you think about that? I mean, this is the aggregation of what may be some level of consensus.
So 2 years ago, I actually published my third medical book, and it was called Fixing Healthcare in Nigeria. That was the title. And I proposed sort of 5 major things that could be done. I released it for free, so free of charge, so people could learn about the healthcare system, look at some of the statistics in the healthcare system, see how bad it is, and look to improve it. And some of the things that I suggested were around our maternal mortality statistics, the number of mothers that die in the process of childbirth, some of the highest figures in the world. The number of children that die under the age of 5 years old are also some of the highest in the world, even compared to Iraq, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan. Our figures are comparable to those kind of countries that have been at war for a long time. I suggested centralization of some of our services as well to make sure that we achieve economies of scale, and I think that that's important. People think that you can have a world-class healthcare center in every state, but what I said in my book was there's a reason why Dangote has not put a factory in every single state. It's because you need a certain number of cases for specialists to see, and I spoke about technology as well, and the role of innovation in healthcare.
These are things that we're going to need now, because people are talking about the fact that while we're all focused on COVID-19, other things are falling by the wayside. Lassa fever, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, tuberculosis. These are all things that are killing more people than COVID-19 has killed.
Absolutely.
So going forward, how do we do this now? You've mentioned the 5 areas, but how do we specifically target those? Because now attention is focused on it.
Absolutely. So in your intro, you said that I run an air ambulance, but I actually stepped away from that. I now run a healthcare investment company, so I've handed over the air ambulance to the management, and we raise money and invest in different areas of the healthcare value chain. So I think the investment is key, but not just anyhow investment, actually smart investment from experts that kind of know what they're doing, understand the data, and understand the healthcare landscape in Nigeria, and understand, most importantly, that we have to do a lot more investment and make a lot more impact with 10%, maybe 1% of the resources. So I'll tell you why that is so. In the UK, their healthcare budget per year is about $200 billion.
$200 billion.
For 65 million people. Our total budget in Nigeria, everything, it's about $25 billion. That's the entire budget. And remember that we spend about 60 to 70% on that, on debt repayments. So what we have left for healthcare is really small, and we have 4 times the number of people. And we don't even have the existing infrastructure to leverage on. So we need to be looking at healthcare in a radically different way from the way that it's done in the Western world. Because when you even look at the amount, in America, what they spend on healthcare per person, per citizen, is $10,000. So if you move to America today, your healthcare spend per capita would be $10,000. If you lived in Norway, your healthcare spend would be $7,000. If you lived in the UK, it would be about $4,300. If you look at the federal budget today, which is not always fully funded because of our fiscal constraints, you're looking at about maybe $10, $20. So from 10,000 to 20. So we need to be very, very innovative. We need to get people in the room that know what they are doing. We need to get policymakers in the room that have looked into the statistics and can make smart investments. We need to be looking at how we can really do more with less.
We've got a minute, and I must ask this in that minute. A lot of those who need all these services and who will be impacted by this are not in the city center, they're in the rural communities, which brings forward the question of affordability of all this.
Absolutely.
When people mention telemedicine, the question that follows naturally is, how do you get the tele or whatever it is down to the rural areas?
Absolutely.
Do you think there is investment opportunities for those who are looking to invest in that kind of thing?
So we've recently invested in telemedicine quite extensively, and I think that this might be the only way for us to be able to, or one of the strategies that we can use to do more with less. So I'll just give you the last set of statistics. In Europe, you look at about maybe 42 doctors for every 10,000 people. In smaller countries, in less rich countries, you look at about 20. In Nigeria, there's about 4. So we have very, very few doctors. We have a huge problem with the brain drain. So how do we get those doctors to be able to access the patients that need them? And I think that that's one application of telemedicine. And we also have, Nigeria is a huge geographical space, lots of riverine areas that are inaccessible by road, lots of seasonal roads, lots of places that are very difficult to access, mountainous areas, etc. So we do need to find a way of bridging that gap. So telemedicine and telementoring, that's using doctors in central areas to guide the healthcare workers in rural areas, is a good way to try and bridge that gap in a cost-effective way.
The hand thing that you did for testing seems to have made some sort of mark, because it doesn't involve direct contact with.
Absolutely.
Is that the kind of thing that we need going forward?
I think we need a lot more innovation going forward. And I think that in healthcare conversations, in policy conversations, I think doctors have been a bit shy of really coming forward and saying what they know and sharing their experiences. So when we even talk this COVID, for instance, when we've been talking about COVID, honestly, I've seen a lot of other professions giving their views, writing long articles in the newspaper, but you know, the percentage of doctors have actually been quite few.
Very small, yes.
And we actually know the most about the problem, but we haven't been very vocal about it. And I've always said that medicine, healthcare, is the only place that you'll find that the professionals in the industry are not the captains of the industry. When they're calling bankers, you see all the actual bankers there, but when they're doing healthcare, anybody can come in. You will see, you know, anybody from any industry except the people that actually work in that industry. And I think that's something that has to change, so we can have a group of experts that really understand the system, people that have experience in healthcare, right. Doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, pharmacists, to really come together and start thinking about policy that actually works, policy that makes healthcare acceptable, affordable, and accessible to the majority of Nigerians.
Dr. Ola Brown, a lot of things to chew over for administrators. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. And from Dr. Brown, let us go to Dr. Bolanle Balogun, who is a consultant public health physician. She's also a senior lecturer in maternal and child health at the College of Medicine in the University of Lagos. She joins us via Skype from Lekki. Good evening, Dr. Balogun. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. It's good to be here.
Let me dive straight into it and ask you about these special children that have been the focus of part of our discussions in the first half of the program. Do they constitute really a medical risk at this point?
Yes, they do. And it's a two-way thing. So we shouldn't just be concerned about the risk they pose to the society. We should also be talking about the risk that they face as well. They are a high-risk population because they're internally displaced, and they're children, so they face medical as well as social problems. They're at risk of malnutrition, they're at risk of communicable diseases, they're at risk of accidents and injuries, including road traffic accidents. And then we know that socially, they are denied access to education, they face poverty and have to beg on the streets. You know, they don't have access to proper shelter, living conditions. A lot of them are in hostile environments. So we all, apart from the risk that they pose, because some of them become instruments, you know, in the hands of people that do not mean well in the society. For example, they could become recruits for insurgents. You know, they could go into crime and steal and all that. So, and now we're talking about the spotlight on them vis-a-vis COVID-19. They could be a potential source of spread, not only of COVID-19, but other communicable diseases. So the risk is vice versa.
Indeed, when you say that the risk is both ways, that is understandable. What needs to be done with them now? What has been decided to be done with them is to hand them over. In many places, particularly in the northern part of the country, they're moving from one state to the other. Officially, they are being relocated to their states of origin. But some are also moving in other directions. And it's at that point that one is asking the question, what should we do with them now? If you agree that they are a risk of whatever sort, what should really be done to mitigate that?
Well, I would say that whatever solutions we look at need to be culturally sensitive. It's a cultural thing, an issue that has been on for decades. It didn't just spring up now, and those things tend to be around for even many more decades to come. So it cannot be, you can't, wish it away with a wave of a hand. That would be wishful thinking. So I would suggest a lot of community dialogue is warranted in this case. These children that are being asked to go into religious education, leaving their states, the government needs to have meaningful dialogue with their family members. It's not enough to waive a threat of jail sentence and all of that. When that threat is no longer there, these children are going to be pushed back into the streets or to other states that would have them or would not notice them. So I would say, cultural sensitive solutions are highly warranted. And at the discussion between government and the community, some things that I would hope will be discussed would be even the repatriation. Some families may not be there, may not be in existence for these children. And for those that are still in existence, government needs to encourage them to welcome these children back and ensure that they are actually empowered again in the society. Government has a role to play. We need a lot of political will in this instance. It's going to take a lot of financial commitment, a lot of changing in the institutional framework, setting up structures for social support, education, feeding, all-round well-being, including their mental health. So we need to see a lot of commitment from government, and we need to see them working together with the community so that when the threat of COVID is no longer with us, we still see sustainability in these solutions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balogun. One hopes that the administrators and those who are going to be taking these decisions in the days and weeks to come will take quite a bit of what you've said to note. Dr. Balogun, of course, joined us via Skype from Lekki in Lagos. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you.
We'll take a break, and as usual, when we return, we'll go outside our shores and find out what's happening in other parts of the world with regard to COVID-19. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Before we go outside our shores, let's take two state updates. First, from Imo State, where our correspondent, Eitokwe Kutei, has the update.
Although there is no known existence or official report on cases of almajiris in Imo State. But today, we spoke to a cross-section of Imo indigents who shared their opinion on this issue.
Almajiri as a phenomenon is, to a great extent, culture-specific. People on ground are not used to that system. They don't practice that system. They don't regard that system. So there's going to be a system clash here now.
That we are still discussing about Almajiri in this present time shows leadership failure. Concerted efforts were supposed to have been made to deal with this challenge. I'm surprised that this is 2020. We are still discussing about this issue. Maybe we thank God that maybe COVID-19 has helped us to, discuss, to come to reality about this challenge. And I hope and pray that the government should deal with this problem and then solve it as a national issue.
From Owerri, the Imo State capital, Eyitope Kuteyi, for COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Eyitope. In Ekiti State, the government there says its present priorities do not include consideration for any Almajiri from the north to reside in the state. For the state, the current pandemic is enough to worry about. For more, here's Babajide Agbeyo.
For the government of Ekiti State, accommodating Almajiris into the state is not an option at this time. The Commissioner for Information says the state has a lot to handle at this time. The challenge of the pandemic is enough to battle with, and the state is not ready to compound the situation by allowing any extra burden to come into the state.
I don't believe that we have that kind of crisis at hand. We don't have that situation. But one thing I can say is that if that happens, then we'll know what steps to take. We're not going to make a ruling on something that has not happened or on something that we do not anticipate as a state. Because I believe the Almajiri culture is something that, is mostly prevalent in the northern part of the country, not here in the south. Now, the priority we have right now is the health and the well-being of the people of Ekiti State. That is why we have our borders shut. We're not even allowing people who are indigenes of Ekiti, but who live outside the state, to come in. If you're going to come in, then we quarantine you for 14 days.
In managing the pandemic itself, the 150-bed isolation center in the state has been commissioned, and it's good for use at the moment. And the state has also announced that the molecular laboratory will be commissioned on Monday, and with that, sample testing can begin in Ekiti State. Babajide Agbeyo for COVID-19 update.
Countries around the world are starting to reopen, albeit with new guidelines. Turkey, Spain, and the United Kingdom will all start lifting restrictions on Monday. France will gradually open parks, beaches, lakes, cultural venues, restaurants, and bars in the coming week. Jordan is reopening houses of worship next Friday. The World Health Organization's COVID-19 Special Envoy, Dr. David Nabarro, says people must be prepared for new outbreaks of the virus to build up very quickly, and warns that the virus has not gone away despite lockdowns being eased.
Hotels open in Austria today in a further easing of the country's lockdown restrictions. For now, they're only open to citizens, but there are hopes that foreign tourists will be able to visit once the borders with neighboring countries open in mid-June. In Scotland, people are now allowed to meet friends and family again. But first, Minister Nicola Sturgeon urges caution and calls on people to maintain social distancing measures. Turkey has also relaxed some measures, resuming some mass prayers at a limited number of mosques after a break of more than 2 months. The country has suspended public prayers, limited travel, and closed shops and restaurants. However, the government has started to ease the measures amid a slowdown in infections and deaths. Greece has announced that it will open its doors to visitors from 29 countries from June 15, as it tries to relaunch its tourism industry. However, those countries do not include the UK, Italy, Spain, and France, which have been badly hit by the pandemic. Hundreds of schools in South Korea have closed due to a spike in infections, just days after they reopened to millions of children. Most of the new cases are in Seoul. It comes after officials reported the highest daily rise in new infections in more than 2 months.
Visiting websites of both the World Health Organization as well as the NCDC, and then, of course, channelstv.com will provide you with all the information you need about every aspect of this pandemic, whether it be local or international. We encourage you to, of course, take personal responsibility and stay safe even as we go into the weekend. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale. Good night.